A little thing about Isaiah, the high priest, about 800 years before Jesus. And obviously an important position in Judaism. The high priest was the big cultic figure for the community. The temple was massive, and there was one room in the temple called the Holy of Holies. It was shrouded by a massive curtain, and inside that small room was the Ark of the Covenant, not the one that's floating around somewhere on C-SPAN, but the real Ark of the Covenant. Inside it had the tablets of Moses, the Ten Commandments. And with the community had the understanding of God's merciful presence was there in a very special way before that tabernacle. So the high priest, on one day of the year, that Yom Kippur, that the Jewish community celebrates, you'll find out about that, Ryan. Yom Kippur would come in, go behind the curtain on behalf of the people, prostrate himself, and whisper before the tabernacle the holy name of God that they received, that Moses received on Sinai, Yahweh. And the name was so holy that people would always use Adonai, Lord, instead of the holy name, which is, by the way, probably a very respectful way for all of us. But the word, interesting, the word Yahweh that Moses received on Sinai, it's not a name, it's a riddle. When he asked God, what's your name? What can I tell the people who sent me? And really God's saying, none of your business what my name is. You can't capture me by a name. Can't put me in a box by a title. So the riddle of Yahweh, the translation, the best we have is, I am who I am. That's the living presence of God, much more than the human mind can comprehend. But anyway, the high priest then would breathe that out. He wouldn't even say it out loud, the holy name, before the tabernacle, praying on behalf of the people. And so that was the moment that apparently Isaiah experienced the power of God's presence. Scared the hell out of him, literally. He was really terrified because he recognized immediately in the presence of the loving holiness of God, we recognize our sinfulness, our weakness. And he said, look at me. I'm an impure man, And the great gift was not to talk about his sin and weakness, but he became then the great prophet. From the priest to the prophet to the people. And it was bad timing. Unless we think these are only ancient stories of the past. It was a time of recession. Wars were going on. Get the connection, kind of the repeats of human history were taking place at that very time. Disillusioned people and putting their faith in different areas. And that was his job, to bring faith back to the community and to recognize the people, to bring them back to their original covenants. So that was a very powerful experience. And he was the one also, we remember at Christmas time. He made the great prophecy about how God would come and care for the community. The wonder counselor, the Prince of Peace, and all those wonderful Isaiah prophecies. Paul, on the other hand, was the great Pharisee, great mind he had. We don't think Paul was married. However, I also think, reading some things about his life, I don't think any woman could stand living with Paul. He was a true character, and very arrogant. Was top-notch in his own field of study. He was persecuting early Christian communities because he wanted Judaism the way he thought it should be. And the early Christians did not fit. They were heretics. So he was locking them up left and right. His experience is literally the knock-off horse. We're not sure it was a horse, by the way, probably a camel. But it's easier to say horse than being knocked off a camel. He had an experience, and remember, both he and Isaiah never met the physical Christ, the Jesus of Nazareth. His is, again, one of the deep spiritual experience, but of the risen Christ. And he was the one who began to formulate with the early community the very first, what we call it, the kerygma, the very first proclamation. And the proclamation was, again, based on God's coming to humankind for both saving us, healing us, putting us back together inside. And his great gift was to recognize and to proclaim wherever he went the gift of the resurrection. No resurrection, no faith, we're done for, go back home, literally. So I think his gift was the understanding of the risen Christ, and going back to the early witnesses, which he said talked to him, apparently, some of these 500 who met Christ, which says early Christianity was an explosion of faith, not a development. That that resurrection was the most profound happening. And we kind of have to keep going back to that. That's why these are the mentors of faith, Isaiah and Paul. And Peter now. Peter in the boat. And look at the way Luke tries to help us understand this story. Remember, we can read the scriptures just line by line, and sometimes we miss the depth of them. We miss what Luke was trying to maybe help us understand even more so. The first thing, it's an encounter with the Christ. But what does Christ do? He goes into his boat. Peter's not part of the crowd listening. He's busy washing nets. He's got tasks to do. And so he's doing his work, probably listening with one ear. And the teacher, as he calls him, the master, needs the boat. And without an invitation, though, he comes and sits in his boat. Here's, by the way, I think what Luke would like us to understand. Here's the boat, right here. And the Christ comes and sits down with us. And while he's sitting there, he says, I'd like you to move out to deeper water. Deeper water. And that's, again, that we're looking at the scriptures rather than superficially. The invitation is to go deeper into our life with the risen Christ, who's with us. And then this massive haul of fish that takes place. The fish are living in dark water. When they are brought to the surface, they come to the light. So Luke is saying about the fish, the story of the fish. It's being raised from darkness to light when you go out to the depth. So you have a deeper understanding of your Christianity, of the Lord who's in the boat with you. And so the first thing that happens to him, he said, this is too much for me. This is just too much. And then again, he looks at his own sinfulness because he feels, I'm in a presence, I'm encountering loving holiness. And he says, look at the mess of a man I am. And what does Christ say? And that's good for all of us. We're in the boat. We're getting deeper water, deeper understanding. We're moving from darkness to a better light. And what the Christ tells us, first of all, when we look at our weaknesses, he says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. My presence is with you. You're encountering me. My presence is with you. And I shall get you through. And with the last part of the scriptures, and they followed him. So the story is our own way of being reconverted again to the presence of the Christ. So we listen to the word. We are nourished by the bread of life, the Eucharist. Remember, I love that wonderful saying that a wise person said, the Eucharist is not a reward for good behavior. It's food for the journey. It's food for getting into the boat, and to be the companion of the risen Christ with us. So the human soul is constantly looking for an encounter with God. I think Ralph Bunche, Nobel Peace Prize winner, gave a wonderful understanding when he said, an idea is best transmitted when it's clothed in a person. And so the idea of God is clothed in Jesus for us. So we would have an intimate encounter, not with an abstraction, but the loving person and presence of the risen Christ who brings us to his body. And with that direction, everlasting life.